Hello everybody and welcome to our new video series We Are the World Games. My name is Philip Döring and I am happy to announce our first guest today, Rhaea Stinn from Canada. Rhaea is a powerlifter. She has participated in 3 editions of the World Games. She currently holds 4 world records and has been our Athlete of the Month in November 2019. She has competed at top level for many years and I'm sure she has a lot to tell. So, let's call her. Hi, Rhea. Thanks for being with us for the first interview of our new series. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we start to talk about you, maybe our audience is not only powerlifters. And I think everyone knows what weightlifting is, but maybe not everyone is familiar with powerlifting. So, could you tell us what's the difference between weightlifting and powerlifting?
So powerlifting is a strength sport composed of 3 lifts: the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, whereas weightlifting is the snatch and clean and jerk. The squat, bench, deadlift in competition, you get 3 attempts at each of those 3 lifts, and then they add your best attempt of each of those together for your total, which you're ranked on within your weight class.
So are these 2 completely divided communities, or are there people who do weightlifting as well as powerlifting?
There's a handful of people that I know who do both weightlifting and powerlifting, but for the most part, they're sort of completely separate entities, completely separate sports.
So you would be only an average weightlifter, probably.
Yeah, average or potentially below average. It's movements that I don't do, and weightlifting movements are very, very technical. And I've never spent enough time trying to perfect them. I've done a few weightlifting competitions probably 10, 12 years ago. I did a couple, just dabbling in it, but it was never something I put very much time into.
So you're based in Canada, and you just told me this is your garage that has been converted for the time because we're still in the middle of Corona. So how does Corona affect your training and your life?
Well, thankfully, we have a lot of gym equipment. My husband and I have sort of run our gym, our training club, and through the years have acquired a lot of equipment. So we were able to basically send all of our club members home with a rack, a weight set, a bar, so that everybody can basically keep training how they have been with the competition equipment that we train on all the time. So we're very fortunate that way. All gyms here are closed. Most people are working from home if that's an option. So it's pretty different than normal, but thankfully the training aspect of it for us is more or less the same, just missing our training team.
And so usually you don't train at home at all, but you go to the gym?
Right, yeah. We have a powerlifting specific gym here. We were in a bigger facility and had a little space, and then sort of right as Corona came into Canada, we were moving gyms anyway. So right now our new space is more or less empty and everybody has the equipment at home.
So now how much do you train? How many hours a day?
Typically I train 5 days a week, anywhere between sort of an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on the training day.
Okay, so I say before we start getting into your career, well, we could have a quick look at a video from the World Championships last November in Dubai, where you won, where you became world champion, and maybe you can tell us a bit about the competition.
So at this World Championship, I knew it was going to be a close battle. I knew training had been going fairly well. My closest competition, Natalie Hansen from the US, who's won the prior 2 years at 84 kilos. I knew I'd have to have a good day in order sort of to be in the running to have a shot at my first open gold. Squats training going into this meet had been pretty good. My biggest fear was hitting depth. So getting the hip joint below the knee joint. Thankfully, I got my first one there. It moved as it should. I was maybe a little bit more tentative than I should be, just trying to get to depth to make sure that my first one was in there to secure that lift. was happy with how things were feeling. Body was feeling really good. This was my first meet at 84 kilos. Typically I compete as a 72 kilo lifter. This year I decided to move up just for competition's sake, feeling that moving up might be a better fit strength-wise and just with the girls I was competing against. So the extra body weight helps move weight, and it also takes the stress of having to make weight off as well. My second squat here, it moved really well. I was happy with that. But as you'll see, I got called on depth for it. I have 2 red lights come up there, and they're both for red cards, so which is a depth issue. So I chose to.
What went wrong there? It was not low enough or not long enough?
Not low enough. Exactly, not low enough. So the hip joint wasn't below the knee joint. I would say it was pretty close. I got 1 white light. So 2 of the judges didn't think it was good enough and 1 did. So I repeated the same weight on my 3rd attempt here. So for my 3rd attempt, I knew I needed to sink it a little bit deeper. The load had been a little bit slow on it. As I was setting up there, I started to set up and I'm like, this rack weight's not right. It's not what I had called for. So that's what this little adjustment here is. Rewatching it, it's one of those, it seems like there's so much time since I've been wrapped and ready. But in the moment, it didn't seem that bad. So I knew I needed to sink this one just a little bit lower to get the score on the board. Like I said, I knew it was going to be a close competition with Natalie and knew that only getting 1 squat probably wasn't going to let me have a shot at winning. So here, I knew I needed to sink it a little bit deeper, so just pushed it in a little bit more. It was a little bit more challenging, I think, because of that. But I forget if I got 2 white lights or 3 white lights on that one.
So it's really interesting to hear how it feels for you to rewatch it and what you feel during the competition. Yeah, because that would have been my next question. How confusing is it if you go up there and then it's not the right height? And you just said it wasn't that bad this time, but I guess it can throw you out of your concentration.
For sure. Like watching it, I was sort of surprised. Watching it after the fact the first time, it was like, whoa, how was I not rattled and thrown off? You don't see everything in the video, but leading up to it, there had been, I think the girl ahead of me had something weird happen on the platform, whether she dumped it or there was some weird situation. And again, I'm sort of in my own zone, so I don't really know the context of everything. But the load was slower than it normally is. So we time all of the wrapping and the getting up the ramp for sort of how the competition's flowing. So rewatching the whole thing, it's like I'm waiting there for probably 30 seconds at the top of the ramp ready to go, which is longer than normal. And then I get out to the platform and the rack height's wrong. And it's just one of those sort of, you laugh at it after the fact because it's like, whoa, watching this, I'm sort of rattled. But in the moment, it was like, okay, just in the zone and just waiting to execute.
So is this also part of the training, like the whole run through, like going up on stage, going there, and that you do like this whole process?
So in training, like we obviously don't have a stage in our gym, but you're definitely thinking about timing and thinking about, okay, when we're in our heavy training, usually if you know sort of how big your flight's going to be. So it's typically about a minute per lifter. So if there's 8 lifters in your flight, there's going to be about 8 minutes between attempts. If you have a bigger flight of 14, there's going to be a little bit longer. So just training your timing accordingly. So either you're used to a longer break or you're used to a little bit shorter time frame there. And yeah, just thinking about, okay, I need to have my wraps rolled here and wrapped at this point in time. There's a lot of visualization that goes into the whole training process, just like any other sport.
So and what do you think about just during the lifting, when you go down, what goes through your head?
Usually not a lot. I usually try and not think and just let body take over. Biggest thing I'm usually thinking about is just trying to stay tight, having taking a big breath into my belt and keeping that core tight. There's sometimes it depends on what's been going on in training. There'll be a few different cues I try and do within my body just to tighten things here and loosen things there. But yeah, it's not a lot of thinking. Usually just as I'm going down, I'm waiting for the depth call from my husband, who is, you saw coaching me there, just telling me to come out of it for squats.
Okay, so let's go back to the video and watch some more. So next will be bench. And in bench, we watch not all 3 attempts, but only number 2 and 3. But you did a new world record in your 2nd attempt already. Maybe you can comment a little on that.
So bench training had been going really well. I think the increase in my body weight helped bench the most. I missed my opening attempt. I had got it according to the platform referees, and then the jury, who's another set of referees who are overseeing the lifting, they overturned it to a no lift for some downward movement. So I had to repeat the same weight on my 2nd attempt here. It was a world record attempt on my opener. So then my 2nd attempt here is also a world record. Basically, I just went out there for my 2nd, knowing that I needed to clean it up a little bit more, sort of take it out of the jury's hands. And just the press was a little bit cautious because on the last one I had a little bit of a dip that I got called on. So on this one I got 3 white lights, sort of took it out of the hands of the jury, didn't give them an option to overturn it. On my opener I had got 1 red light for downward, which is why the jury was able to overturn it. But that one moved pretty well. It was a little bit slower than I had sort of been expecting 205 to be. But again, it was just a tentative thing. I needed to get that lift in. And then I jumped to 212 and a half here on my 3rd. So just trying to sort of create more of a gap between myself and Natalie, numbers wise, and increase the world record a little bit more here as well.
So does it make it easier for the 3rd attempt when you know, okay, I just got a world record? Or?
The pressure's off on my 3rd because I had already made my 2nd attempt. The 2nd attempt is definitely a little bit nerve-wracking because I needed that attempt in order to get a total, or I needed a bench attempt, and I'd rather not leave it to my 3rd. So the 3rd here to me looked a little bit better than my 2nd did, just because I wasn't pressing it as cautiously as I did on my 2nd, or on my opener, sorry. As I go to press off my chest here, I'm able to push a little bit more aggressively, I would call it, than I did on my 2nd, to give me a little bit more of a gap there between myself and Natalie going into deadlifts.
You just said something about about pushing your back. Did you kind of change your technique over the years in your career, or develop your technique?
Yeah, my bench has really progressed in the last 3 or 4 years. I started working with a new coach about 3 years ago. I started working with Blaine Sumner, who's an excellent lifter. He won the super heavyweight men at Worlds this year as well. I started working with him about 3 years ago, and it sort of opened my eyes to some new possibilities with the gear. So definitely my bench technique was the thing that has changed the most since working with him. My setup and my bar path and where I'm touching on the bench has definitely changed, but it's progressed my bench kilos in the last 3 years, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Lost you with the internet. No, you're there again.
Now I'm there again. Okay.
Okay. Can you just say the last thing once more? You said it changed over the last 3 years. Your bench technique.
Yeah, I've changed how I'm bringing the bar down, my bar path, and sort of where I'm touching, and it's been helpful immensely. I've probably increased my bench by about 50 to 60 kilos in the last 3 years, which is pretty crazy when I've been at this sport for 16 years already.
So I guess bench press is kind of your favorite discipline. Can you say that, or do you like them all the same?
Uh, Bench is probably my favorite right now. It changes just depending on how training's going. But yeah, bench, especially with what we've been able to do with the bench shirt the last 3 years, the tinkering, the little changes that we can do with it, and sort of the learning that's gone along with that for me. Um, it's the one that I'm the best at, sort of ranking wise as well right now. So that helps a little bit too. But yeah, bench would be my favorite at this point in time.
So let's go for the third discipline for deadlift and see how you go to another world record.
So with deadlifts, I knew I was in a pretty good spot, subtotal wise versus Natalie. I really just wanted to be pulling after Natalie is all I was thinking about in my head. My opener moved well, like it should. My second, again, I just knew that I needed to make my lifts. I wasn't worrying about the score sheet. That's what my coaches are for. Second move solid, sort of like I thought it would move. After I came off this lift, Ryan, my coach there, actually said to me, he's like, you have it in the bag here. And after he said that, after we were talking, after the event was all over, he's like, I probably shouldn't have said that to you because then I didn't know what you would end up doing on your third here if you knew that you had it. So my second put my total to a world record total. So this attempt was just trying to up that world record total and keep me in first place here. Natalie didn't end up going, she ended up pulling after me for my third here, but she didn't end up trying to beat me. I think if I had missed this attempt, she may have increased her third deadlift to try and go for the win. I think Ryan thought at that point, based on how her second had moved, that sort of she was already out of it. But yeah, it was nice to finish the day on a good lift. It was definitely a hard third attempt there for me, but it was a solid way to end the day, up that world record total, and get my first open world title.
Well, it was definitely a good end. So I have one more technical question. For the deadlift, you go, one hand like this, the other like this. Is this by choice? Well, everyone does that. Is this by choice, or is this obligatory, or can you just lift more?
It's a grip thing. So you can hold more weight with the reverse grip. Some people do double overhand, so where both their palms are facing their bodies. Usually that's with the hook grip, so the thumb is actually underneath the fingers. Theoretically, that should be a better grip because you're more symmetrical. It also really hurts. I've played around with it a number of times and just can't get over the pain of it, so always end up going back to the mixed grip. But it's just, yeah, it's a little bit stronger of a grip, so you're less likely to lose the weight out of your hands than just doing like a double overhand without the hook.
I guess you could say that you're one of the strongest women in the world. Can you tell me something about what does being strong mean to you?
That's a tough question.
Well, we
I
need
think
tough
being
questions.
strong, you need tough questions. There's so many different avenues that you can look at strength as, like physical, the mental side of it. Obviously, physically, I'm really strong. I think that's really helped my mental strength as well. Just in that the two complement each other. When you're working on your physical strength, there's a lot of mental skills that you have to work on as well. So just strengthening sort of very holistically in that sense, I think powerlifting does help.
So tell us, at what age did you start with powerlifting?
I started powerlifting when I was 14 back in 2003.
So 14, for most sports, this would be pretty late to start. How is this with powerlifting?
So with IPF powerlifting, the youngest that you can be to compete is 14. So I did start at sort of the youngest age there. I had been playing a lot of other sports and knew that getting stronger for those would help me. My brother had been competing in powerlifting for about a year at that point in time. So I'd watched some of his competitions, had been at some events, and was like, oh, this seems like a cool sport. Like, I might be good at it. I had an interest in getting stronger and lifting weights at that point in time. So with some convincing, my brother, some convincing by my dad, my brother took me to the gym with him when he was home from university at Christmas in late 2002, early 2003. And I started training with his coach and club then, and really have been at it ever since.
So you're really from a powerlifting family, is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Both my siblings, my brother and my sister, have competed. My brother still competes. My husband is also an athlete, and his sister also competes. So it's really an actual family thing. And then we have a lot of people that we consider our powerlifting family who are friends that we've made over the years that we're very close to.
And can you make a living only with powerlifting, or is this not really possible?
No, it's not possible, unfortunately. Not in Canada, at least. There are some countries who have a bit more funding than we do. How I describe it to people is it's a really expensive hobby. It's not something that we make money off of from competing. Very rarely is there prize money from an event. So it's just something that we're passionate about and really enjoy doing. So keep at it.
Well, that's too bad to hear, but I guess this is true for most of the World Game sports.
Yes.
So you're 31 now, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And this is kind of, this is an age for most sports. It's kind of there are more and more young people coming up, and is it the same with powerlifting that you feel it's kind of getting harder to compete with all the young girls?
The thing that's sort of motivating for me and is very cool to watch is there's a lot of older women who are still competitive, or I shouldn't say older, women in their early 40s who are still competitive at the open level. There's a number at, especially classic worlds, there's a number of open world champions who are actually masters athletes but are choosing to compete as open lifters. So they're still getting stronger. I don't think age is necessarily a barrier. Does it get harder? Sure. But I think with this sport too, because it's not necessarily a high impact sport on the body, if you train right and recover properly, you can keep going at it for a long time.
Well, that's interesting. What you say, that it's not a high impact. I would think, okay, just lifting things that are just as heavy as possible is not really good for your back and for your bones.
It's true. Like there's definitely more prevalence of, say, back injuries and hip injuries for a lot of athletes. A lot of it for a lot of people is just trying to stay injury free and staying healthy. And if something does get injured, sort of properly rehabbing it to be able to get back to what you were doing before. I guess I look at a sport like gymnastics or something like that, where there's actual physical impact compared to powerlifting. That's a pretty controlled environment. There's not a lot of external changes that happen.
So what are your next goals? And will you take part in the next World Games that just have been postponed to 2022?
Yeah, definitely one of my major goals is to compete at the now 2022 World Games. This year, because it was supposed to be next summer, this year was supposed to be the qualifying year for it. We're all sort of presuming right now that that'll get bumped back to next year now, though nothing official has come out that we've seen. So yeah, the goal for this year will be to try and defend the world title at Open Worlds, and then moving into next year, we'll be looking at to try and qualify for the World Games and then compete, and the goal will be to podium at the World Games 2022.
So powerlifting has been with the World Games for a long time, and you have already participated in 3 editions. And looking back, can you say something, what's special about the World Games, maybe about the atmosphere and the several editions you've seen?
Yeah, the World Games is a totally different experience than a regular World Championship. Just being in an environment with so many different sports, you're at a catering hall. It's what I envision to be the closest thing to an Olympics that I'll ever get to. So just being able to go and watch other sports and interact with those teams that way is obviously different than a World Championship. And then usually the scale that it's run on, it's obviously the best of the best athletes there. So the competition is a little bit higher than a regular World Championships. Athletes are pushing themselves because it's every 4 year, an opportunity that only comes every 4 years. So yeah, just the feeling of it is all very different. Definitely one of the highlights of my sort of powerlifting career was back in 2009, where we got to walk into the closing ceremonies of the games in Kaohsiung, and we weren't really sure what we were going into, and we were probably 100 meters or so from the stadium and sort of walking with all these athletes, and you just could start to hear like this roar. And then as you got in, it was like, whoa, that's the crowd. And it was just one of those, like, you felt like a celebrity, even though you're just like, I'm just a normal person walking in here, hi. And we were doing autographs and taking pictures with all of these fans. And it was just like, this is not something that's normal for our sport. So it's just a really unique experience there.
So finally, can you say us just about powerlifting? What is the most special thing about powerlifting, and where does the fascination for powerlifting come from for you?
I think part of the draw of powerlifting is that there's really no limit. There's always more weight that you can put on the bar. So like you'll set goals and then you'll hit them, and it's like, well, you're not done there, right? There's always, well, now can I do this? What can I push my body to be able to do? So I think that sort of endless cycle of there's always more weight to put on the bar is something that keeps me coming back.
So I have another question after you said that. In a competition, do you compete more against the others or against yourself?
There's definitely both sides of it. Part of it depends on what competition it is. If it's a worlds, you're competing against others because what's your goal? Well, your goal is to win. So it doesn't really matter what your total is as long as it's higher than everybody else's. Whereas a lot of times at sort of a more local meet where there might not be the competition, that's when you're more competing against yourself. You're trying to push yourself. It sometimes is weird in that way too, in that even at a world, if you're trying to total more than everybody else, you might total more than everybody else, but it still not be the best or the day that you really wanted. So there's always those little goals on the table and little things to push you forward to see, like, if I had the absolute perfect day, what would my total be?
So thank you, Rhaea, for the interview. It was really interesting, and we hope very much to see you in 2 years in Birmingham 22, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And your new 84 kilo world champion with 685 kilos from Canada, Rhaea Stinn.